There is a sentence that sounds hopeful until it is placed on the shoulders of someone who is already suffering. Heal your spirit first, and your body will follow. At first, it feels like good news. It tells you that the pain is not permanent. It tells you that something hidden can be restored. It tells you that faith reaches places medicine cannot see. But then the body does not change. The test still comes back positive. The migraine returns. The medication is still necessary. The grief still wakes you at 3 in the morning. And the hopeful sentence quietly changes its tone. It stops sounding like a promise and starts sounding like an accusation. If your body is still sick, perhaps your spirit is still sick. If the symptoms remain, perhaps you have not forgiven enough. Perhaps you did not pray correctly. Perhaps you believed with your mind but doubted in your heart. That is where a beautiful truth can become a cruel burden. The inner life matters. Fear, shame, isolation, chronic stress, and unresolved pain can affect the way a person sleeps, eats, thinks, relates, and cares for the body. Peace can change the way a day is carried. Hope can make treatment easier to endure. Reconciliation can release a tension that has shaped a home for years. But your body is not a spiritual examination paper. Symptoms are not God's handwriting in red ink. Illness is not proof that faith has failed. And seeking medical or psychological care is not an act of unbelief. The question is not whether the spirit matters or whether the body matters. The question is whether we will let God meet the whole person without turning one part of that person against another. Christian teachers have often emphasized that human beings possess an inner life that cannot be reduced to appetite, sensation, or appearance. That insight is important. You are more than your latest emotion. You are more than the fear passing through your nervous system. You are more than the diagnosis in your medical record. You are more than what happened to you. Scripture speaks about heart, mind, soul, spirit, and body because the human person has depth. We can know something is true while still struggling to feel it. We can love God while carrying trauma. We can make a wise decision while the body is trembling. We can be physically weak and spiritually courageous at the same time. The mistake begins when a rich biblical picture is turned into a mechanical sequence. First, repair the spirit. Then the mind will obey. Then the body must recover. But 1 Thessalonians 5:23 is a prayer for complete sanctification, not a medical flow chart. Paul names spirit, soul, and body because he is asking God to preserve the entire person. He is not teaching that every disease begins in the spirit or that bodily healing can be activated by getting the order correct. The Bible does not describe the body as a disobedient machine waiting for the spirit to press the right switch. It describes the body as part of God's creation, mortal, vulnerable, dignified, and awaiting redemption. That difference matters. A formula says, if you do this correctly, your symptoms must change. Faith says, whatever happens next, you will not face it alone. A formula makes the outcome the proof. Faith makes the character of God the foundation. A formula produces control. Faith produces trust, courage, obedience, and room for mystery. In John 9, the disciples saw a man who had been blind from birth and immediately looked for a spiritual cause. Who sinned? Was it the man or was it his parents? They treated the body like evidence at a trial. Someone had to be guilty. Jesus refused their categories. He would not let suffering become a tool for assigning blame. That moment should govern every conversation about faith and illness. When someone is in pain, the first Christian question is not, "What secret failure caused this?" It is, "How can the works of God become visible here through compassion, truth, courage, care, and love?" The friends of Job made the opposite choice. They looked at a suffering man and built a theology that protected their sense of order. If Job was suffering, they reasoned, Job must have earned it. Their speeches sounded religious. Their conclusions were wrong. They increased the pain of the person they claimed to be helping. That same error appears whenever a believer with cancer is told to search for hidden resentment. Whenever a person with depression is told that joy would return if prayer were sincere, or whenever chronic pain is treated as evidence that someone has made an idol of symptoms. There may be times when confession, reconciliation, rest, counseling, or a changed habit brings real relief. But no one has permission to reverse engineer another person's illness into a moral verdict. Jesus did not make wounded people prove their innocence before receiving compassion. Neither should we. Rejecting blame does not require denying the connection between inner distress and physical experience. Long-term stress can disturb sleep, tighten muscles, affect appetite, intensify headaches or stomach problems, and make existing health conditions harder to manage. Anxiety can change breathing. Grief can drain energy. Trauma can keep a person alert long after danger has passed. This does not mean that every symptom is caused by emotion. It means human beings are integrated. The body participates in the story. Imagine someone who learned as a child that the safest response to conflict was silence. Years later, every difficult conversation brings a racing heart and a locked jaw. The body is not rebelling against faith. It is performing a survival pattern that once served a purpose. Imagine a caregiver who has spent 2 years meeting everyone else's needs. She prays every morning, loves her family, and believes God is near. Yet she sleeps poorly, forgets meals, and lives in constant exhaustion. Her body may not need a stronger command. It may need rest, help, nourishment, medical evaluation, and permission to stop carrying a load that was never meant for one person. Imagine a man who has hidden panic attacks because he fears that Christians will call them spiritual weakness. His secrecy adds shame to anxiety. The first movement of healing may not be a dramatic prayer. It may be telling the truth to a doctor, a therapist, a pastor who understands limits, or a trusted friend. The body sometimes changes when the inner life becomes safer. Breathing may slow. Sleep may improve. Muscles may release. A person may regain the clarity to follow a treatment plan, prepare a meal, take a walk, or ask for help. These changes matter, but they are not a universal timetable, and they are not a guarantee of cure. 2 Corinthians 4 contains a line that prevents us from confusing inward renewal with guaranteed physical recovery. Paul acknowledges that the outward person can be wasting away while the inward person is being renewed day by day. Both realities can exist together. The body can weaken while faith deepens. Treatment can fail while love remains strong. A person can need mobility assistance and still move through life with astonishing courage. A believer can die without having been defeated by God, abandoned by grace, or exposed as faithless. Christian hope is not built on pretending mortality has already disappeared. Romans 8 says, "Creation groans, believers groan, and the Spirit meets them in that groaning." It also speaks of the redemption of the body as a hope still awaited. That means The gospel gives us more than a technique for obtaining immediate relief. It gives us companionship in suffering, purpose in weakness, wisdom for decisions, community for the burden, and a future larger than death. Healing now is a gift. Medical progress is a gift. Emotional restoration is a gift. And resurrection is the promise that prevents present suffering from having the final word. Some believers speak to the body only when something is wrong. They rebuke it, they distrust it. They call hunger, fatigue, tears, or pain an attempt by the flesh to take control. But the body is not an enemy agent inside the house. It is where you receive a child's embrace. It is how you carry groceries to a neighbor. It is how you sing, work, kneel, laugh, create, and rest. It is limited, but it is not worthless. Jesus did not save humanity by avoiding a body. He entered one. He experienced hunger, thirst, exhaustion, touch, injury, and death. The resurrection did not discard embodiment. It transformed it. So when the body sends a signal, wisdom does not immediately surrender to fear, but neither does wisdom automatically silence the signal. Pain may require examination. Fatigue may require sleep. Shortness of breath may require urgent care. Persistent sadness may require professional support. A changing symptom may require a new conversation with a clinician. Listening is not worshiping the body. It is stewardship. Faith does not have to choose between panic and neglect. It can listen without catastrophizing, seek care without shame, pray without pretending, and wait without abandoning wisdom. If spiritual healing is not a lever that forces the body to recover, what is it? It is the restoration of truthful relationship with God, with yourself, with other people, and with reality. It often begins with 5 movements. First, spiritual healing tells the truth. The Psalms do not train people to hide distress behind religious language. They contain fear, anger, confusion, grief, protest, memory, and praise. Lament is not failed faith. It is pain refusing to become secrecy. Instead of saying, "I am fine because I should be fine," truthful prayer says, "God, I am afraid of what the doctor may say. I am angry that this has lasted so long. I am tired of being brave for everyone. I do not know what healing will look like, but I need you here." Truth brings the hidden burden into relationship. Romans 8 begins with no condemnation for those who are in Christ. No condemnation does not mean no diagnosis. It does not mean no consequences, no grief, or no need for change. It means suffering cannot be used as evidence that God has rejected you. You can admit that you are frightened without becoming a coward. You can confess a harmful habit without becoming unworthy of care. You can receive correction without interpreting correction as abandonment. Grace makes honesty possible because your belonging is not being renegotiated every time you tell the truth. Resentment can occupy enormous attention. Rehearsed conflict can keep the body braced for a conversation that is no longer happening. Forgiveness may be part of healing, but forgiveness must never be used to force an unsafe reunion. Forgiveness is not pretending the wound was small. It is not canceling justice. It is not restoring access to someone who remains dangerous. It is not a bargain in which you forgive today so that symptoms disappear tomorrow. Forgiveness is the gradual refusal to let another person's wrong become the permanent governor of your inner life. Sometimes it happens in a moment. Sometimes it must be chosen many times. Sometimes the most faithful act is forgiveness from a protected distance, with firm boundaries and wise support. Elijah's collapse in 1 Kings 19 was not answered first with a lecture about spiritual authority. He was allowed to sleep. He was given food and water. Only then did the journey continue. This is not a complete medical theory. It is a reminder that God is not offended by ordinary needs. Rest can be holy. Medication can be received with gratitude. Therapy can be a place where truth is spoken. Surgery can be an answer to prayer. A boundary can be obedience. Asking another person to carry part of the load can be humility rather than failure. Faith is not measured only by intensity of feeling. Sometimes faith looks like making the appointment you have postponed. Sometimes it looks like taking the prescribed medicine consistently. Sometimes it looks like apologizing without demanding immediate reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like turning off the phone and sleeping. Sometimes it looks like calling emergency services because the situation is beyond what private prayer can safely hold. The next faithful step may feel very ordinary. That does not make it less spiritual. The false choice sounds like this: either trust God or trust the doctor. Either confess Scripture or describe symptoms accurately. Either expect healing or prepare wisely for treatment. But wisdom does not require this competition. The Good Samaritan did not offer compassion as a substitute for practical care. He treated wounds, transported the injured man, arranged shelter, paid for continued help, and promised to follow up. Love became visible through a chain of concrete actions. Luke is remembered in the New Testament as a physician, not as a man who had to renounce medicine before serving the gospel. Prayer and treatment answer different questions. Medicine asks what can be observed, tested, prevented, treated, or managed. Prayer brings the whole person before God: fear, hope, decisions, relationships, mortality, and the longing for healing. Good care can include both. Pray before the appointment. Pray during treatment. Pray for the clinicians. Ask questions. Seek a second opinion when appropriate. Follow evidence-based care. Invite trusted people to help you remember instructions. And do not stop or change prescribed treatment because a speaker, video, or private impression promises a faster spiritual path. New, severe, or persistent symptoms deserve qualified evaluation. That is not fear. That is responsible hope. Prayer becomes exhausting when every sentence is monitored for enough confidence. Was the declaration strong enough? Did doubt enter for 1 second? Was the wrong word spoken? Did someone nearby make a negative confession? That is not fellowship. It is spiritual performance anxiety. The suffering person becomes responsible not only for surviving illness, but also for maintaining a perfect inner atmosphere. A healthier prayer can hold desire and surrender together. Father, I ask for healing because you are compassionate and because life is precious. Give wisdom to everyone involved in my care. Show me what I need to face, change, accept, or release. Protect me from shame, panic, and false promises. If recovery is slow, keep me from calling slowness abandonment. If the answer is different from what I want, keep me near. Teach me to receive help without humiliation and to live faithfully in the body I have today. This prayer does not lower expectation. It removes manipulation. It asks boldly without pretending to control God. This may be the most important part of the message. What happens if you forgive, pray, rest, seek care, tell the truth, and the symptom remains? You do not become the failed example. You do not owe anyone a hidden sin that explains the outcome. You are not required to call pain an illusion in order to protect God's reputation. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to ask again. You are allowed to adjust your life. You are allowed to use medication, mobility aids, therapy, and support. You are allowed to celebrate small forms of healing that do not look like a cure. Perhaps the body still hurts, but shame no longer owns the room. Perhaps the diagnosis remains, but isolation ends. Perhaps treatment continues, but fear no longer makes every decision. Perhaps energy is limited, but you stop spending it on pretending. Perhaps the miracle is not that weakness vanished, but that love found you inside it. The Christian story does not end with disembodied escape or with the command to think positively until mortality disappears. It ends with resurrection. That promise gives dignity to every imperfect form of healing now while refusing to call the present condition final. For the next 7 days, do not attempt to force your body to prove anything. Practice truthful, embodied faith. Day 1. Remove the verdict. Write this sentence: my symptoms are information, not a verdict on my faith or my worth. Then write what you actually know and what you're only afraid might be true. Separate facts from fear without shaming either one. Day 2. Tell God the unedited truth. Read a psalm of lament slowly. Name the anger, fear, grief, or exhaustion you usually clean up before prayer. Do not rush toward a triumphant ending. Let honesty itself become an act of trust. Day 3. Choose one wise act of care. Schedule the appointment. Refill the prescription. Prepare a real meal. Ask about the symptom you have minimized. Take the walk that is appropriate for your condition. Go to bed at a reasonable hour. Choose one action, not 10. Day 4. Release condemnation. Read Romans 8 and notice that the chapter contains weakness, groaning, hope, intercession, and inseparable love. No condemnation does not erase struggle. It changes the meaning of struggle. Say, this difficulty is real, but it does not prove that God has rejected me. Day 5. Examine one burden. Is there resentment, secrecy, overwork, fear, or isolation that needs attention? Do not diagnose your illness from it. Simply ask, what freedom and responsibility require now? Forgive if you are ready. Set a boundary if one is needed. Tell the truth to a safe person. Seek professional support when the burden exceeds what you can carry alone. Day 6. Receive help. Let someone drive, cook, listen, pray, sit with you, take notes, or accompany you. Galatians 6 tells believers to carry one another's burdens. Receiving help is one way the command is fulfilled. Day 7. Define healing more honestly. List every change that has mattered, even if the diagnosis has not changed. Clearer thinking. One full night of sleep. Less secrecy. A difficult conversation begun. A treatment decision made. A moment of joy that pain did not steal. Thank God for what is real without pretending that the unfinished part is finished. The desire to heal the spirit first can hide a deeper desire to find the one action that guarantees the outcome. If the correct verse, confession, act of forgiveness, prayer language, or mental state can make recovery inevitable, uncertainty appears to disappear. But control is a poor substitute for peace. Wholeness is not having every part of life obey your preferred timetable. Wholeness is becoming truthful enough to receive grace, wise enough to accept care, courageous enough to make changes, humble enough to need others, and secure enough to remain loved when the outcome is unresolved. The inner life can be healed while the body is recovering. The inner life can be healed while treatment continues. The inner life can be healed while disability remains. The inner life can be healed while grief comes in waves. And sometimes, as fear loosens, sleep returns, relationships become safer, habits change, and care becomes consistent, the body also experiences meaningful relief. Receive that relief with gratitude. Do not turn it into a law for everyone else. Your testimony is a gift, not a measuring stick. So do not declare war on your body. Do not call every symptom a spiritual trespasser. Do not make pain your identity. And do not make recovery your proof that God is faithful. God was faithful before the result. God remains faithful during the uncertainty. You can stand in that faithfulness and say, "My body is not a verdict on my faith. I will listen without panic and seek care without shame. I will tell God the truth instead of performing certainty. I will release condemnation, receive grace, and make the next wise decision. I will forgive without abandoning justice or safety. I will pray for healing without blaming myself for the timetable. I will accept medicine, rest, counseling, community, and practical help as gifts when they are needed. I will not use faith as a weapon against my body, and I will not let suffering persuade me that I have been abandoned. This is not a smaller faith. It is a faith strong enough to live without false guarantees, strong enough to ask boldly, strong enough to lament honestly, strong enough to receive help, strong enough to wait, strong enough to act, strong enough to remain near God when the answer is still unfolding. If this message speaks to you, write one sentence in the comments. My body is not a verdict on my faith. Let that sentence remove shame. Then take the next faithful step toward truth, care, peace, and wholeness.